It looks like Cinderella won't be going to the ball after all. Plans to electrify the Midland Mainline have been put on hold because of soaring costs. The route's been dubbed the Cinderella line because of a lack of investment down the years, but now it looks like it's being left behind again, sacrificed in a way to make way for rail projects in other parts of the country. Rob Pitton reports.
It's a vital link to London, but compared with other routes, the Midland Mainline is already in the slow lane. Trains can't reach top speeds on much of the line, and it's stretched to the limit, with passenger numbers rising 40% in 10 years. The answer was meant to be electrification. At the moment, the route is only electrified between London and Bedford. The plan was to extend all the way up to Sheffield, with electrification due to reach Corby in 2017 and Leicester, Derby and Nottingham by 2019. But the costs have been soaring. When the scheme was first announced, it was £257 million. Then it rose to £500 million. By last December, it had reached £1.3 billion. And that's why Patrick McLaughlin has put the brakes on.
Better services can be delivered on that line before electrification, with such things as speed improvement works, so that works on the electrification will be paused.
It's a story the Sunday Politics looked at back in December. At the time, the official line was that the work was going ahead.
It's a £38 billion project across the whole of the country. And, let's get real about this. In 13 years, we had less than 13 miles electrified. We are doing it right now.
Okay.
We promised we would do it. We're doing it. The money is there to do it.
So it was an uncomfortable announcement for an East Midlands-based minister to have to make. Patrick McLaughlin said work to improve speed along the line will still go ahead and defended his record on investment in the region.
The refurbishment of Nottingham station, all the investment that is going into Nottingham station, more investment in Nottingham in the last 5 years than was seen in the previous 13 years of the last Labour government.
Business groups and councils across the region have lined up to condemn the decision, and passengers aren't impressed either.
They're going to have to do it at some point, and every year they leave it, it's going to get more and more expensive.
I travel down south quite a bit. I've got a daughter who lives down there, and the differences are massive. I see it all the time. So they seem to get all the money, they seem to get all the improvements, and we're the ones that have to do without.
I was hoping that it was HS2 that had been cut.
Maybe something to do with a recent Deputy Prime Minister who lives in the Sheffield area, who's no longer Deputy Prime Minister.
There's no word yet on when electrification will eventually happen, if at all. The Transport Minister's ordered a report into how projects like this can be managed in the future. That's due out in the autumn.
Well, joining us now from the Labour hustings in Nottingham is Lillian Greenwood, Nottingham South MP and Shadow Rail Minister. Lillian, thanks very much indeed for coming out of the hustings to talk to us. But you're not impressed, are you, by the latest twist in the Midland Mainline saga at all?
No, I'm not impressed at all. It's an absolute disaster for my city and for our wider region. Just a few weeks ago, the ministers were out here in the East Midlands telling us that they were going to be investing in our transport infrastructure, and now the election is out of the way. They've put us in a siding and we're not getting the investment that was promised.
Well, many other improvements we're told, like upgrading stations, improving the line to make trains travel quicker, are still going ahead. So does it really matter that we're not getting electric trains?
It absolutely matters. Those are the things which were going to be done ahead of electrification. We're already in the plans. It's back in the 1980s, the Tories cancelled Midland Mainline electrification. Now they're doing it all over again. We've got 3 East Midlands MPs sitting round the cabinet table. They've badly let us down. OK, well, Andrew Bridgen, as you can hear there, Lillian Greenwood very passionate about this and suggesting that the East Midlands is now stuck in the sidings on this issue. Business groups in the region have said this is a bitter blow for our economy.
Well, I took a call from Claire Perry on Thursday morning, and she rang and told me that the planned electrification was going to be paused for this spending round. But it's a bit richer of Lillian and the Labour Party to say about investment in our rail infrastructure. Hornby electrified more track in that 13 years than the last Labour government. 10 miles of electrification. And the amount of money, as Patrick McLaughlin rightly said, that has been invested in Nottingham Station, a huge amount of money.
But the point that Lillian's making is that this was promised, and as we saw in that clip of our report back in December with Heather Wheeler, it was very clear that the money was going to be there and this was going to go ahead, and you're not doing it.
And I predicted a long time ago that the HS2 project is going to suck all the money out of the budgets for the Department of Transport, and Lillian supports HS2. That's where the money's going to go, and we're going to have the running down of our existing rail network.
So this is what you get for supporting HS2, Lillian, is what Andrew Bridgen's saying?
That's a complete red herring. £38.5 billion promised for Network Rail's work over the next 5 years. And it's this government's failure to get a grip. After the election in 2010, they put projects on hold. They didn't do the planning and preparation work, and that's why Great Western and other electrification projects are over budget. They were warned about this by their top civil servant. They were warned about it by the Office of Rail Regulation and by the Transport Select Committee. They lied to the electorate before the election. They promised us this investment, and now just a few weeks later, the rug has been pulled. And frankly, Andrew Bridgen should be ashamed of himself and his lack of ambition for our region. Yes, we need electrification of the Midland Mainline, but we also need high-speed rail. That's the future for ensuring that we've got the capacity
my constituency
we need
hasn't even
on our
got a
railways.
passenger railway station within it. So, 8%
He's happy to see
8% of people.
billions of pounds going into London and the South, and he doesn't speak up for our region. I think it's shameful.
Are you ashamed, Andrew Bridgen?
I'm not, but I'm not surprised. I'm fighting for actually having a passenger railway station in my constituency. In North West, we have no passenger railway station. On average in the UK, 8% of people travel to work by train. In my constituency, it's 0.5% of the population because we don't have access to it. I want to get the Ivanhoe line, New Forest line reopened. That will be about £20 million. It's very affordable.
Margot Parker, let me bring you in here. Like many things in the current economic climate, this all comes down to money, and surely this scheme has been put into the sidings, as Lillian Greenwood describes it, because we can't afford it.
Well, we can afford it. It's not acceptable. I mean, the government still continue to feature on their vanity project, HS2, and they're not saying anything about that. It was in the manifesto. People said on the train that I travelled on, which was last Thursday afternoon, and they were adamant. Well, this was a very shabby thing to be in the Tory party manifesto, and then 7 weeks after, here it is, it's gone. So the public are very disgruntled about it, Andrew, and I know
I agree. We should scrap HS2 and use that money for existing service improvements.
Is this particular plan to put it on pause, is the blow to the economy, is it as big as people are saying it's going to be?
I believe it is. I think it absolutely is. There's a lot of new ventures coming into the East Midlands, and we want to give them the best possible chance. And also hard-pressed commuters that are paying a fortune, and it's just not acceptable. The line needs to be upgraded.
Lillian,
end of story.
If this project, Midland Mainline electrification, can be put on hold while other projects go ahead elsewhere in the country, could we also lose HS2?
Well, I think there's a real danger that the Midlands could lose out, especially if we fall into the trap of saying, well, do we want one project or the other? We need both. If you look at London and the South East, £15 billion into Crossrail, £6.5 billion into Thameslink. Labour did build electrified railways, 67 miles of the electrified HS1 line. We need to make sure that the East Midlands, which has the lowest in the last 5 years, the lowest rail spend in the country, we need to make sure we're getting our fair share, and I'd expect to see East Midlands MPs working together to argue for that money, not throwing in the towel, as unfortunately Andrew Bridgen and his Tory colleagues seem to want to do.
Andrew Bridgen, we're not getting our fair share, is what
we should scrap HS2 and use the money to improve our existing infrastructure. The electrification will be far better value for the East Midlands than HS2, and that's what I'll be pushing. I
am rather troubled, though. The figures must have been known last year. So, it's very conveniently been sort of swept aside until after the general election. And I can say the voters on the train that I was on definitely thought that. There was a great deal of anger because of that. They did feel that.
Lillian's agreeing with you and saying that those figures were known.
The network rail management have just been dismissed, basically, and reorganised. They were set up by the Labour Party, and they've overseen a 400% increase in the cost of this project, which is obscene. It is taxpayers' money at the end of the day, but I'm not convinced that HS2 won't go the same way.
Lillian Greenwood, what's next? Is there anything we can do to turn this round? Anything that you can do?
we're going to be pushing really hard. It's a nonsense to say that ministers didn't know about these cost escalations. They were told about it. I've been asking questions about it for a year. We need to be making clear, we need to be making the argument to the government to say this investment is absolutely vital. How can they talk about a Midlands engine for growth or a Northern powerhouse when they're withdrawing the transport infrastructure we know is necessary for our economy to succeed? And I hope that all Midlands MPs will be making that argument to the government. They need to get their priorities right, and our priority is electrification of the Midland Mainline.
Briefly,
well, let's agree and scrap HS2 then. If the Labour Party don't support HS2, the project's finished. We can do it. You can do it now.